It's a really interesting proposition in the sense of it's the first thing we've seen out there from a big brand.
I'm not sure if we can get away with something that simplistic, but it's also refreshing. So who knows? It works.
This week we're going to be looking under the hood of NatWest's new digital banking brand Bo and putting that under the microscope. Bo launched around 2 weeks ago, and to equal parts fanfare, negativity, around 18 months and 100 million quid after it began building. The brand states that it's targeting the 16.8 million Brits currently living with less than 100 quid in savings.
Looks like a bit of a defensive play though, as NatWest currently have a pretty strong monopoly over trust in this market. A big part of their language resonates around security and not putting pressure on the user to switch their current account. The big thing though, for them will be the culture bit.
Yeah, and that's a big important bit, but we know that those people over there, both Tunde and I've got a really good friend who works there, and working on their tooling, and we know that they've brought in a load of people from Loot, the team which was disbanded a few months ago, so if they're given the freedom to do what they can do, then I'm sure they will do a fantastic job.
And this is reflected in their approach to closed beta. They've already had 2,000 RBS staff testing this internally for them. They've been sure to try and debug this as much as possible before they get other eyes on it. So with that, we're going to dig right deep into this and with our fresh eyes and tell you how we think about their onboarding.
So I was sort of struck by the first bit, which is the question of what is Bo, who's it built for, who's it by, and why is it interesting? You got any thoughts on that?
I remember reading a bit about the name, and I think it's really cool that they were very much like, it doesn't actually mean anything. It's just Bo. So I think that was pretty cool. Outside of that, I'm still like real new to what Bo is, but sure.
So like they've got as we mentioned in the intro a bit, they're sort of targeting this sort of the same core market, or they believe they're targeting the same market as people like Monzo and so on, people who are allowing people to build up savings. And it's a really interesting proposition in the sense of it's the first thing we've seen out there from a big brand, really, apart from maybe Finn by Chase out in the States, where it's a big bank coming forward with a digital play, getting straight there into the market quite quickly. So the first thing to note is it's a sort of similar product suite to what's going on out there in the market with like Monzo and Starling. They've got sort of like a cash withdrawals policy, so you can use it abroad for free, that sort of thing. And they've got sort of like this, high level of FSCS protection, which they've got via their banking license with NatWest. And as you mentioned there, the fact that it's the name Bo, they tried to make this a little bit of a play around the sort of like, it doesn't mean anything to English ears, but it's sort of like, it's got that little fada inflection above the O, which is a Gaelic thing, and it means cow, essentially. Oh, wow. I have no idea why they've decided to do that. It's great. I mean, I'm sure cows have the nuance that many, especially Irish cows, have the nuance that all financially conservative people will appreciate. But Bo's a really good way of being able to, I think, from my own personal experience, get straight into the market with maybe a different segment to what they're imagining at the minute. They're thinking really heavily in terms of that Monzo market, but they're like 4 years too late to that. So, but what they do have the opportunity to do is to go and leverage that trust that they've already got with like millions and millions of like people who are maybe older than the people who are using Monzo, and get them introduced to the world of digital banking and get them starting to use products that are intuitive and that sort of thing. So that's the sort of what I would imagine to be their actual customer base. Free cash withdrawals are going to be an attractive proposition, but there is no limit to that, unlike some of the other brands who've, I guess, running out of cash a little bit in that regard.
Yeah, so they've gone with like a serif typeface as sort of like their lead typeface. So off the bat, they're very different from what we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing, really, sans serif-y, startup-y kind of fonts. So I think they've definitely tried to, and we're going to dig deep a bit into some of the other things they've done, but they definitely tried to peel it back from the millennial kind of illustrations and visual language you're used to seeing. Even in some of their illustrations as well, it's very, we're going to get into it, but they've opted towards like sketches, which is kind of like interesting, a bit different. But from what I've seen thus far, it is, as you said, it might just be a play to appeal to like a slightly older, slightly more, sophisticated market.
Well, maybe, yeah, for sure. And another thing to note, just on the sort of on the actual product itself, which I thought was really fascinating. And it's really interesting. Jason was also in the channel saying something along the lines of, this is exactly the value proposition that people actually see for things like Monzo right now. Monzo's big play is to get people's salaries deposited into the account, but the way it's actually being used, this is the way that it's being used. And Bo are sort of like upfront with that. They're like, they've got the language there in front of them saying things like, you know, it's okay if that's the way that you want to behave, because, you know, we're in a position to be able to accept usage of that nature.
It's refreshing to see, just because, as you said, I mean, that's how I use my Monzo account.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's indicative that they've been doing a lot of testing. They kind of understand the market. They know what people are using. And as you said, they've been upfront about it. So that's actually pretty refreshing to see.
Exactly. That's kind of what it is, and a kind of a very brief rundown of what their design language is like. But we've got this, they've had a bit of problems over the past few days, unfortunately. There's a big sort of news announcement. I think it was James Cook from The Telegraph reported on 30% of accounts being applied for were fraud accounts. So there's sort of this, they're facing many of the same problems that a lot of these new technologies have when they're coming into the market, which is every new product that comes in is going to be subject to, you know, these fraudulent processes because they're new. You know, they've not been stress tested in the same way. So that was one of the reported things. I don't think it's had an impact. You know, NatWest have got quite a famously high level of security. I think they had like the highest performing security tech stack in the market this year. I think it was rated at like 85% or something, which is pretty good. And then finally, just to run down, is what the commentary have been saying. So our CEO David has been quite vocal about what the product is, and he's suggested it might not last more than 36 months. The prediction being that NatWest will find something else for it to do. And then James Cook has taken the other end, the Telegraph guy we mentioned earlier, saying that it could be find a market which is not necessarily already speaking to, but more speaking to the market of this is a product for people who have a NatWest account who maybe don't want to leverage all of that trust into companies like TransferWise or something like that. They maybe want to, you know, NatWest have spent hundreds of years building up this trust. So it's an important thing for them. So there's two sides of the coin. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't think either of the commentators we mentioned know what's going to happen. We just got to see what does happen. And for now, we're going to take a teardown of the look of their onboarding flow, and we're cutting it up into individual chunks where we're going to compare it with different products currently on the market who we deem to be their competitors. So shall we kick off with, this is going to be an introductory carousel for Bo, and this is the first point of contact between the user. So the carousel kicks off, really sort of nicely designed images, and then it's showing information, what they can accept or expect to get from the product, and then they can either log in or sign up. So they go through the sign up process, and then they've got an instance of seeing all the requirements, and then a few like FAQ type things folding out to show all of the different parts of information that are required. So that's quite a bit grayed out text, not the most easy thing in the world to read, but a pretty nice. What initial thoughts on that?
Interesting place to put it.
So early on.
Early on. So what we're looking at is what we're attempting to do here. We're trying to get users through the flow as quickly as possible, and what you've now sort of, I guess, bombarded them with is this like full page carousel. What are they called? Accordions. And then it's a bit heavy. It's a bit heavy, if I'm being honest, and it's things that I haven't seen, but I can see that from the offset, and it might talk to the kind of markets we said they might be appealing to, the slightly older markets where, as much as streamline onboardings are, you know, all the craze, just communicating security matters might be super important for, you know, slightly older markets. Whereas
for sure,
I know me, I'm pretty easy with, you know, just accepting things and getting on with it. So
just getting on with the flow.
Getting on with the flow. So I think that's interesting.
But what the main thing that we're trying to look for when it comes to introductory carousels, what are the big things that people want to see?
You're trying to communicate benefits. You're trying to tell them why they're here. You're trying to make that. You're also trying to communicate the tone of the brand from the offset as well. So as you said, Maniz do a, you know, hey Joe, you guys know I'm a big fan of Maniz. They do a great job over there. So So essentially, that's what we're trying to do when we're opening carousels.
And what are your initial thoughts on the design language of that experience? It's quite consistently applied, right? And I quite like the little sketchy vibe to it.
I wasn't too sure. It's kind of grown on me. I don't know. I think my thing is in this climate that we're in now, whereas we're really sort of going to like a very sort of visual, artistic place when it comes with design. I'm not sure if we can get away with something that simplistic, but it's also refreshing. So who knows? Who knows? It works.
Sure.
It works.
And I think, different horses for different courses as well. So if they were going after that slightly older demographic, then we know what they like. The big thing for them is that visual design probably comes after things like rates and all these benefits. So like Marcus, for example, by Goldman Sachs, when it came into the market, offered a 1.5% rate, which was market leading at the time for an easy access account. But so that was the big seller. But the other side of that play was that it was super elegant, graceful. The platform was sort of like generously spaced on yours. And so if you can integrate these sort of like smaller bits of illustrative flair within the product, then you've got a really good chance of making the rest of the space around it work for you. Yeah. Does that make sense, or am I trying to talk to the designer about how design works?
You hit it on the nail. Okay.
Well, good. So that's kind of what Bo's doing there. A lot of information quite early on in the process. They might get a little bit startled. So we'll see how that. But then here we've got an example of what we think is a really good carousel, which is going to go now. Once we're happy, straight up into sign up. The first bit of information they're gathering, email, straight off the bat. The little tick next to the email lets us know when the information's been correctly formatted and entered. And then we click on all the necessary checkboxes. I like that little sort of flare of color as well. Nice QR code as well if you wanted to mix it up with a load of different types of media. And then once we've done that, we're straight into their onboarding flow. So yeah, just off the bat, what's the thing that you noticed there more than anything?
So this is kind of why I said the privacy upfront thing about trust Bo, that Bo went with kind of threw me slightly off. So what my knees do really good here is from the jump, FCA registered logo, Trustpilot score, and I think sometimes that might be that is enough to let people know that hey, we're safe. Put your money with us. But like I said, it's all dependent on the kind of demographic. I'm sure, like we said, smart guys over there. So I'm sure they've tested it and some insight that we've recently found out in the team. So we're working with a client, and we realized that a lot of these, larger incumbents, which are trying to build sort of, I guess, challenger-like banks, still carry the same kind of risk appetite over into these new products that they're building. So it often is hard to kind of scale back as much as possible. And a lot of their legal departments require people to explicitly mention privacy policy up front, whereas here it's just a tick box and you can access it if you want to. So I think that was like the interesting takeaway for me. And
I really liked a lot of the things about this, which were sort of hero items, which were the actual design language is super slick, and they've done a really good job of translating that throughout the app, haven't they? But we've also got as you mentioned there, the ability to integrate these trust touch points. So at every single stage you've got, there's a recognizable thing that I trust. There is another recognizable thing that I trust. Making use of those is really, really good. And then a few other things like making ultimate reference to the pricing point. So start an account for free. Start an account for, whatever, is a really simple way of going, I better do this thing then. This sounds great. And then so like the ability to offer that flexibility and then also the language thing at the top for an international product is a really neat way of saying, look, this is ultimately safe, it's ultimately flexible, and you should do it just to see what it's like, sort of thing.
And as you said, once again, it will all go down to like the market there, Bo are trying to appeal with, and what's come out in their particular user testing. But do you need to explicitly dedicate a whole page to fees? When, as a user, what do I really want to know? I want to know that I'm not going to be this account I'm setting up is free, and let me know a bit about the rest later down the line. But once again, it's interesting. It's interesting. We'd love to hear from the guys and see what problems they came across. But I do think a full page for fees might be a bit overkill.
Maybe.
But we'll see.
We'll see how they got on with that. So it's big things there, big learnings from that. Make sure you're clearly translating the trust in simple and clear messaging. Make sure that the free bit is made sort of important right at the beginning, and then introduce to sort of the tiers later on. And then also get yourself involved in all of the other really cool stuff that's going on within that product. So the really nice design language and stuff. So note here that you need to add your details before EIDV. This should be redundant with OCR. Oh, I'm not sure what they mean by that. Let me just one sec. So yeah. Okay, yeah, so they're talking about optical character recognition and the ability to sort of add details in. So like, yeah, there is the ability to add information in the platform, and then that information does get removed later on down the line. We've not really seen a really great number of companies taking on that. I mean, Honcho doing a really good job of that sort of thing, and stuff like that. And it's going to come in more and more, but we're just looking at this particular instance of when information can be added. Also, some people like the security of being able to just go in there and confirm and manually add the processes as and when. But yeah, it's a really good point. OCR, a big thing that's going to come in and make so many people's lives a lot easier. So yeah, thank you very much for that comment. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is the second part of the process, which will be around sort of the entering of personal details. So this touches a little bit more on what we were saying there about OCR and stuff, but kicking it off with the bow process, where we get going with our name and then entering in the last name. So it's going in two separate free text fields, I guess, for data entry reasons. Entering in their dates in, again, a sort of like a formatted free text field, and then adding the mobile number in. And then we've got a verification code, pretty standard practice there, received. And our email address is only asked for then. Like, that was the big difference between what's gone on with monies in the last episode, in the last clip, and then with this one is they've gathered the email address later. I wonder why I'm not sure why they would have done that, what the decision is there. And then the postcode. Again, I've got some information about where Bo's available there, which is quite neat. And then we select the address. And this is sort of along those OCR lines, the ability to kind of very quickly select from a list, based on your email address, from your postcode, the ability to kind of quickly confirm all that information. So nationality information, nice list of sort of like these icons on the left-hand side to quickly pick out your country. And then we confirm that, and then go into tax residence things, nice little crown design there. And then we confirm where we're paying tax. So they've asked for a lot of information there about the user and their tax status. Predominantly, that's the big thing that they're asking for. Initial thoughts on what's gone on there?
So just to answer your question a bit earlier about why most people put email addresses earlier.
Yep.
So what we've seen as well from my user testing, people are a bit put off if they are told to enter too much personal information up front.
Yeah.
It's also a way to get people back into the system if they've dropped out. So what we have seen happen is, if you've dropped out and then you come back into a process again, you enter your email address, they notify that you've been there already, send you a magic link, jump you back into the app again. So it kind of saves for you as the process has gone on. But as far as that, I'm a big fan of it. There's contextual cues, so little things like when you're entering your name, you get the cue at the bottom that says, and even bold in certain parts that lets you know, hey, like, please let this information match the information on your ID. I think that's pretty cool. I think we talk about often, it's a question I always bring up to designers when they get here, is this one input format at a time phase that we're seeing more and more. And I think what it does is that it just gives users the ability to focus on one task at a time. And I think I'm personally a big fan of that as well. So I like what they've done there. But yeah, all in all, they've done pretty well with this.
And the other thing about gathering that information, as we mentioned before, is free text fields or whatever. The ability to limit sort of mistakes that a user can enter is going to help you ultimately with making that experience a lot better. So one man, even simple things like entering first name and last name, that just limits the number of sort of potential sort of mistakes there. And then giving the format in a date is just to, make sure that everything's consistently aligned within their databases and make sure all the information they've got is really good.
Also, they carry over something super small, but they carry over information in sort of like the headers. So as you saw there, it'll say like, "Oh, hello, your name," and then then ask you for what you need, and all of that just adds a little personal touch to it, which I'm a big fan of. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And then, but one thing which we do really like about, especially the way that TransferWise, their borderless account works, is the ability for them to sort of surface this information a little bit earlier on. So we're going to go with that now. And then so they phase the information out, and we'll see how that looks shortly. So we're kind of like, we've got the account going here, and then we're asked to add money. So the card's been ordered here, and then they're doing some ID verification, a little bit of information there, and then we're going to select a reason for using that. It's from a pre-selected list. So again, that pesky data entry doesn't get in your way. And then confirming information via that. Happy with the state of the documents, we can then start to sort of tell them a little bit about what type of account we want. So we've got the personal account here, and that information is gradually sort of phased out over the course of the experience. So, you know, instead of it being, and we've talked a little bit about this, especially when we were talking about Joy over in the States, the ability to have different methods and means of delivering information during onboarding and at different stages of the product cycle. So like there, for example, one of the great things we liked about that was, you know, the user was able to be, you know, they were able to get past the ID verification and do other stuff while that thing's going on. And whilst, you know, Bo may be really good at, you know, gathering that right information at that right time, they might necessarily want to leave that information till later on in the process when it's relevant.
Yeah, it all depends on how they've sequenced it as well. So I think, one of the problems we're coming up with is people don't want to have created an account before they know what they're getting themselves into. So they want to kind of know can I get an overdraft? Can I get these sort of things before the account is officially created? Yeah. So I guess that's why people may tend to cluster all of this all the information they need to give you kind of a decision decision from the jump, as opposed to phase it over. It's interesting. It's interesting.
What would you say is the right way of going about that? It's a hard one.
Yeah, it is a tough one.
It's obviously we don't know what the sort of like the requirements of NatWest or RBS are going to be, so it's probably a little bit hard to say. But in an ideal world, any sort of like current account or banking product which has got a sort of like mid to high level of sort of regulatory environment around it, should they have the opportunity to be able to phase the onboarding in that same way?
I don't know. Let me work through this. Like, let me do my methodology out loud. So I think you got the first way is, as you gradually go through the process, you know, give them things they can opt into, and then sort of take information further down the line. Yeah. Is that even possible? First of all, is the question. Just because, like I said, when asking for an overdraft, there is some information that you need to do before you can even be offered an overdraft. So I think it's hard to say, as you said, without like not knowing what legislation and compliance ask of them. But I think at the end of the day, as we discussed earlier, I think we're going to get into this space towards next year where we're going to have to see a lot more clampdown on regulatory matters, as things become more fraudulent in this sort of challenger space. Yeah. So I think better safe than sorry. Better safe than sorry, if I'm being honest. As much as it's, you know, great UX and, you know, smooth and streamlined, you know, better safe than sorry. So I'd say definitely collect as much information as you need. Definitely try and limit that as much as possible, just because it is quite daunting for users, and that's something we've seen personally from user testing. They don't like to give so much information up front without knowing where this thing is going. Yeah. But you know, you can't get around compliance.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, we're pretty chuffed with the way that they've done things, and just wanted to show you what TransferWise looked like, because that's a really good example of how to make the full experience really, really neat.
Seamless, and it's a great alternative.
Absolutely. So I just got rid of that last one. So the final one we're going to take a look at is eKYC and card issuance. This is quite a little bit of a long one, so bear with us with this. It's all about like ID scanning and that sort of thing. So they've given their recommendations there as to what sort of information is required, and then some of the sort of requirements for what makes a good photo, what's more likely to be accepted. You know, so you'd have to go back and forth which is a nice, neat way of starting the full thing off. And then we've got some, what looks like some fine linen, and a document is about to be scanned. So this, you can see the split line in the middle. Can't see any marks there of who's doing the regulatory sort of checks there. I'd imagine they've probably got their own internal tooling for that, or might be plugging one of the regtex into the back end. If we're happy with the process, then we can sort of see there a few requirements for what makes a good photo again, which is a really good reassurance point. And then this little loading screen, not a load of context there as to what's going on.
Yeah.
But we've got an official IDs completed, and then your moment to shine. This really nice sort of process where they explain what expressions are required. A little smile there. 3, 2, 1, and then we go. And then on to number 2. You've got some information at the top there to make sure that the frame is correct. Close the eyes. Seems like quite a hard one to know when you're counting down, and then the tongue out. I've not really seen anything like this. Forgive me if I'm wrong, viewers. You may know about this sort of thing, or I've seen it before. But you know, asking for this amount of facial recognition is an interesting one. We've seen it with Bo a little, not with Bo, with Bunk in the Netherlands. They'll do this whole like thing, and that sort of thing. So maybe it's I don't know what's going on there. But that's, you know, we've uploaded our 2 documents there, and then once that has been completed, there we go. Thanks for registering. Got a nice sort of like sun cloudy thing, but notably we're stopped dead there. Like we're stopped in our tracks. There's not really another place for us to go until we've finished. So that's the kind of the eKYC bit. It's pretty standard fare, really, in terms of the way that, you know, these companies are now operating in that space. And I thought a little bit overblown in the whole sort of like facial stuff. I just want to, I think the way that some companies do it will say like, take a picture and then do a very like short video of yourself saying something like, I love Revolut or something like that. And then, which is very good. But maybe, you know, is this the right sort of tone of the voice that Bo are after? It seems to be based on what they're saying before. What do you reckon?
It's interesting because for me, it doesn't quite match to the tone they've set visually thus far. You know, stick your tongue. So for users who don't know, essentially this part would be an anti-impersonation check. So that's why often people get you to say something or look in different directions to check that, you know, that you haven't just thrown up a picture of someone else and then said, oh, hey, this is me. So I guess like from the offset, it's fun. It's, you know, different. It's a bit weird. Will people be doing this? Will people be signing up for accounts on the train?
Will they be doing that on the train? That's what I want to know.
Who knows? So
at least they won't have to say anything like "I love Revolut" on the train as well. Which,
true. But it for me, it doesn't quite match the tone they've set. And as you said, like we've seen a lot of things thus far that indicate they might be going for a slightly older audience. Not to say, you know, old people don't have fun.
That's exactly what you're saying, dude.
But what I will say is that up until that, they do a great job at letting you kind of know what's going on, what you need to do, kind of that.
The requirements.
Yeah, they're
really
very,
good at that.
and that's the one thing that I can take away from this and into sort of my own learnings and my own design is let people know what they've got coming up ahead. Be very explicit about it. They are very clear about it.
Yeah,
what
they are,
information you need, you know, big ticks like tick, here's what you need to do, here's what this process will need from you. So I'm a big fan of that.
And then reminding it at the final bit when there's a check, like sort of like, you've done it now, but does it do this thing and this thing and this thing? If so, good. If not, then you better try again, Buster. And then, that's the cool thing. And then at the end of it, we're sort of like left into this sort of hinterland, this sort of purgatory of unregistered / registered hell. But it's quite a nice little image with the sunshiny, cloudy thing, and the birdie's there doing its birdie thing. And then, but what we'd like to see in that instance is, like we've seen in the previous video with TransferWise, the ability to kind of progress even when there's no progression to be made, and to even just do other stuff.
Yeah, even just some context, you know. I think we're going to bring up a video pretty soon next up about what I think Revolut do, and I believe they kind of let you know, hey, we're checking this out. They also give you like a nice, the good thing about like motion graphics and animation is that it kind of keeps you, or it kind of lets you feel, it makes you feel that something's happening.
Yeah. The activity of it.
And activities happening, and they kind of let you know, oh, this might take this long to this long, and you can jump out of the app and we'll send you a notification as to when this will happen. Whereas here, as you said, it's kind of this purgatory that we're not quite sure.
Should I leave the app? Should I stay?
And we're not quite sure what's going on here. So I think that's something that I've picked up on from this process.
Yeah. And then on that note, we'll have a look at Revolut. So yeah, the document is going to be submitted, and then drop down a bit of our nationality information. So yeah, off the bat, this is someone in the UK who is of Czech nationality, so they're able to very simply define what is quite a nuanced personal sort of situation within the app, which is great. And then you can see there the ID card scan is powered by the Onfido SDK. And then once they're happy with uploading that document, they're taken through to the next section, back of the card. Again, same process, continuously applied design, which I think is a really neat way of looking at it, because, you know, stuff like this shouldn't be like jarringly different. And then a similar thing to what we saw really with Bo is that, you know, the instructions as what's going to happen next from a top level. So we're going to do a selfie in this instance, and we're pretty happy with being in the egg there. They've only done a selfie, and they're happy with its clarity. And then we're reviewing the documents within 24 hours. And this usually can take, but they'll send a notification shortly. So they're giving clear information as to what's happening. And then if they do leave the app, which we'll see very shortly, and they come back in, then they're actually deposited straight onto Revolut's sort of homepage. So, and then that sort of like allows them to add money straight away, get money straight into the platform. I think Bo actually can offer this once the account's been opened. You know, the first thing they'll do is ask you to do that, but here we've got verifications completed straight via text. Nice, hooray, language. And a nice way to have a quick look through what's going on the platform before you actually start using it. Get used to what's going on, and then they can actually push some visual prompts to you as well for doing stuff. So like the reason why I thought this was an interesting sort of experience to compare it with is because they go through quite similar cues. You know, the Revolut requires you to do the RegTech stuff and go through all that, but then it does not shy away from letting you get onto the platform and have a nosy around before you know the checks are done. Maybe again that might be to do with the way that you know NatWest is set up in terms of the regulatory environment, but the great thing there is that you know that there's always something for the user to do when they get onto the platform to establish stickiness. You know, the big jump off point here being that the person who we spoke to who opened this Bo account, for example, he was basically just like when he got to that point of waiting, he just lost interest and jumped off. Like he just jumped ship straight away. And then when you're opening a Revolut account, maybe because you know a little bit about kind of the benefits or whatever, but when you get straight in there, you're bombarded with kind of like these visual cues and prompts to do stuff and to really pique your interest. So I guess it begins with a sort of like what you were talking there about motion imagery, the spaceman introduced in the KYC process. And then they go straight into using the software development kit from Onfido. Now this is one of the things you've had a few conversations with people over the year, is how do you integrate sort of like these external, extraneous products into your product and make it look seamless? Is there anything you've learned from that?
I think a lot of it is down to the third party themselves. So what we've often seen is that they so Flux was an example that we talked earlier in the year, and it was good to talk to the actual third party in this instance as opposed to like the bank who then has to input the third party. And they say more time. They are one of the few good guys who try to build their UI around what the brand allows you to do, and we've seen it here. We've seen it in many other places. I think all Onfido really asks for is their logo to be posted, and after that it's pretty much down free reign down to you. But I remember in our chat with Honcho, when you move from the honcho app to the insurance provider's sort of confirmation process, that you're just in the wind then, and you're just subject to whatever UX you're given at that point.
Yeah.
So I think
same with open banking APIs as well. Like when you're taking outside of a bank's into sort of the API gateway of a big bank in the CMI9, for example, so many people are saying how frustrated they were not being able to control the visual output that was given. But same thing with these RegTech providers. I think Onfido do a very good job of being transparent in the sense of like it's a real translucent sort of screen. It doesn't try and be well designed. It's super simple and straightforward.
On that open banking note, actually, something that we've taken away from some testing we did this year was users actually feel comfortable knowing that they jump from sort of this app that they're in into, let's say, their Barclays interface, because it kind of lets them know, okay, I'm in a safe place. I know Barclays. This is as ugly and as cumbersome as some of these incumbents interface are. They're safe with it. I know what this looks like. So it's actually an interesting sort of trade-off into, how safe does this thing feel versus how seamless can I make it feel? And I guess that's kind of like the narrative of this whole discussion has been, how Bo has chosen to like be very, very safe, very, very put trust at the forefront of it, and others choose to be, streamlined as UX and as cool as that, and as fancy with it. So
And where's the middle point? That's the thing. It's sort of like trying to find that sweet spot in the middle is super important. The first action, as we said, is to access a top-up and to put money straight into the account, which is the same process that happens with Bo. And they've been very transparent with that. They're not interested really in seeing your salary put into Bo. They want to see you spending it as a sort of like a little, like ferreting away bit. So the prevention of like an overdraft facility, they don't offer overdrafts really in this product, means that you're sort of able to use that top-up function really well. So that's the key offering there from their product. Any final thoughts on that KYC bit or anything like that?
No, pretty happy with it.
Cool. Final takes from the product. What you thought so far, how you feel about Bo in general, that sort of thing.
I think it's a good product.
Yeah.
They've done well. I think only time will tell as to where they find their pocket in sort of the market.
Yeah.
I think that's the big determinant for me. I think we have, like, as you said, they've opted for this very, sometimes a bit more friction heavy process, which is definitely more trusting, but we're kind of used to seeing, people being a lot more lax and being a lot more comfortable to, I don't have to know all my privacy policy up front. I don't have to know my terms and conditions and everything I'm going through up front. So I want to see how that looks. But they've ticked all the boxes. They've done a great job. And like you said, the guys down there are pretty smart guys. So
Yeah, so as I said, they've got a really great product team. Like they're pretty much the CEO of Loot is now head of product there. So they've got a really dope product. And then they've also got like a really nice sort of approach to behavioral economics. They brought really smart people in that regard. So the big thing that and speaking to a friend about this who works there, it was they just wanted to get like a version of the product out there which was good and functioning, which will allow them to sort of get just good enough, but also B, allow them to develop. It's not about sending a product out there which is perfect straight away. It's about sending something that's good enough and allowing them to go forward with development and to iterate quickly. And that's the big challenge, I think, for a lot of these new market entrants from the big banks, is they're going to have to come to terms with that as a methodology. I guess that's it for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Stop by next week when I'll be speaking to Brolly CEO Phoebe Hugh. What are you going to be up to next week, buddy?
I'll be in good sunny old Nigeria, guys. Enjoy the cold.
See the family.
Yeah, going back to see the family. Got a big sis getting married out there. I'll be away from this, so enjoy the cold, guys, and see you in the new year.
We'll be seeing you in the new year. If you want to see more from 11FS Pulse, head over to pulse.11fs.com, where you can request a demo. If you've got any questions about the product or want to suggest a journey for us to include on our platform or on the show, hit us up on pulse@11fs.com via email or on Twitter @11fspulse. Thanks very much, guys. See you next week. Homescreen is a show about all things product and design, where we showcase some of the best examples of user experiences from the 11FS Pulse research platform, which includes over 2,500 user journeys from financial service products around the world.